the boy of Nazareth, the new home. It was a long, long way from Egypt back to Nazareth, but there was no need to hurry this time. So Mary and Joseph went on slowly day after day. The little boy Jesus loved to run by the side of the donkey. Sometimes he ran on in front and then came back again, laughing happily as he rushed to meet his mother. But of course he got tired, and then Mary would lift him up and hold him in her arms as the donkey trotted along the dusty road. For a while the road ran along near the sea, and Jesus shouted with joy when he saw the lovely blue waves sparkling in the sunshine. Sometimes he asked his mother what Nazareth would be like. You see, he had only seen the big city in Egypt, and he used to wonder if Nazareth would be just like it. "Will there be big palaces there, Mother?" he asked one day as he lay in Mary's arms. "No, son," she said, "there is no palace there, but there are all the lovely green hills, and they are far finer than palaces, for God made them." "Then is there a temple in Nazareth?" he asked next. "Not a temple, but a simple little church where we shall go to hear God's word." "And will there be a big river and boats and things?" came the next question in a very sleepy voice. But Mary did not need to answer, for already the little boy was fast asleep, dreaming maybe of roads and rivers, of seas and hills. After a long time, the road led up a steep hill, and as they came near the top, Mary told Jesus that very soon now he would see Nazareth. At last they were at the very top of the hill, and just a little way down Jesus saw the village, its white houses all gleaming in the bright sunshine. Down they went, through steep and narrow streets, until they came to a little square house with a flat roof and a stair outside. This was to be the home of Jesus until he grew to be a man. Inside it was rather dark, for the windows were very small, but soon Mary filled a lamp with oil and set it where it lighted the whole house. Then they had their supper, and very soon after Jesus was lying on his little mat, sound asleep, tired out after his long journey from Egypt. What fun it was coming to live in a new village! Jesus loved to see all the new things he had never seen before. The steep, narrow streets, the little church high up on the hill, the open marketplace, and Joseph's shop, a joyous place for a boy to play in, besides all the new friends who came to see Mary and who smiled and talked to him as well. Early in the morning, Joseph used to go away to work in his shop, while Jesus stayed at home with Mary, watching everything she was doing and running beside her everywhere she went. Soon he knew, when Mary lifted one of the big water pots, that she was going to the well for water. He thought it was wonderful the way she carried the jar so steadily on her head, and wondered when he would be big enough to carry it for her. At the well he met other little boys and girls, and they used to play games while their mothers talked together and filled their water jars. Then there were the busy days, when the baking had to be done. First of all, the sticks and thorns had to be gathered to make a fire to heat the oven. Then Mary took a little corn measure and filled it with as much corn as she needed for the baking. Jesus used to love to let the cool grains run through his fingers. Next, Mary carried the corn out to the courtyard to grind it into flour in the mill. The mill was made of 2 large round stones, which were very heavy, so Mary usually got a friend to help her to push them around. Jesus liked to watch when the fine flour came running from between the stones, but he looked forward to the time when he would be big and strong enough to push round the stone for his mother. Back in the house again, Mary mixed her flour into dough. Into the dough she put a little bit of leaven and left it to rise. "May I look?" Jesus would ask his mother sometimes, and when Mary said yes, he used to lift the cloth that covered the dough and peep in. The dough had risen high up in the bowl, and sometimes a little bubble came up and burst as the air came through. When the dough was ready, Mary made it into little loaves, just like round scones, and baked them in the hot oven. How good this bread is, Jesus thought as he ate it, and then he remembered all the time and the care that Mary had given to the making of it. Jesus used to like too when Mary sat, often on the rooftop, spinning wool into thread, for she used to tell him lovely stories as he sat at her feet. Then, when the spinning was done, Mary's busy fingers began to weave the thread into cloth. It took a long time and a very great deal of patience to weave a piece of cloth, and when it was woven and then made into a new coat for the little boy Jesus, there was not a happier boy in all Nazareth. He loved his coat, not only because it was pretty, but because he knew that his mother's love was in every thread of it. In the evening, when Joseph came home from work, after they had eaten the supper that Mary had made for them, the little family would gather round the lamp. Then Joseph would teach the little lad verses that he must know, even before he went to school, and Mary would often tell him stories of long ago, as she sat and mended the clothes which he wore out so quickly. So the days went by ever so fast in Nazareth, until the little boy that came from Egypt really began to grow up. As Jesus grew older and bigger, he began to do all sorts of things he had never done before. Now his mother began to take him for lovely walks up over the hills. Mary had told him these hills were the hills of God, and now, when Jesus saw how beautiful they were, he knew exactly what she meant. They were covered with a carpet of fresh green grass, and everywhere there grew the most wonderful wild flowers, red and purple and gold. "These are the colours of kings' robes, are they not, Mother?" Jesus asked as he looked at the flowers. "Yes," answered Mary, "these are kingly colours." "But the flowers are far more wonderful than kings' robes," cried Jesus, "for God made the flowers and gave them all their beauty, didn't he?" "Yes, he did," answered Mary, glad to think that her boy loved the flowers of the field just as much as she did herself. And there were lovely trees too, through which the wind sang. Sometimes its song was loud, and sometimes soft and gentle. But soon Jesus knew all the songs of the wind and understood them, although they had no words. When Jesus was old enough to go out on the hills alone, he used to sit down very, very quietly and wait for the birds and the beasts to come to him. And they used to come. They were never frightened, for they knew Jesus was their friend, and they used to come quite close and peck and nibble all around him. Often Joseph used to do work on farms round about Nazareth, and sometimes he took the boy Jesus with him, and he was always glad to go. Out in the fields he used to see the oxen drawing the plough, while the ploughman guided it from behind. Then too he used to see the birds flying home to their nests, and the foxes galloping home to their holes. He used to see the shepherds too, leading their sheep, He listened as the shepherd called to each one, and he saw how they followed, because they knew their shepherd. But Jesus knew the sheep would not follow if a stranger called them. Now he began to spend more time with Joseph in the carpenter's shop. He used to watch his strong, clever hands as they made doors and boxes and ploughs, and all the kinds of things that people wanted. Soon he came to know the tools that Joseph used: the saw, the plane, the hammer, and the chisel. He was not allowed to use them yet, in case he might cut himself, but already he had made up his mind that he would be a carpenter, and he would work in his shop just like Joseph. Soon the time came for Jesus to go to school. He went with the other boys of Nazareth, and all of them sat on the floor around the feet of their teacher. There Jesus learned to read and write and spell. He heard too of the great heroes who had lived long ago, and these heroes were his heroes. He loved to think of all the great things they did, and often, when school was over, the boys used to hurry up to the top of the hill, and there they played that they were heroes and did what they had done all over again. Jesus loved these games, and the other boys always chose him as leader, for he could think of such lovely things to do and to pretend. These same boys used to like it when it was market day in Nazareth. Early in the morning, stalls and tables were put up in the marketplace, and then the people used to come, leading their donkeys or driving their carts, which were loaded up with the goods they had to sell. Some brought oranges and other kinds of fruit. Some brought butter and cheese. Some brought fish. Jesus always liked to look at the strong fishermen who had come up from Capernaum to sell their fish. Some sold grain and corn, and there was always one stall where a man sold sparrows, and they were very cheap. Sometimes there were holidays, and then Jesus and his friends used to take some food with them and go away for the night, right up to the hilltops. These were great days, when the wind blew fresh and cool, and the sky was clear and bright. For a while the boys would romp and play, and then lie down to rest under a great tall tree, which shaded them from the sun. But best of all was to lie flat on the very top of the hill, and look down into the valley on the other side. There great roads ran by, and all sorts of wonderful things could be seen going along these roads. Sometimes a company of soldiers, their helmets flashing in the sun. Sometimes a king with all his servants. Sometimes a long line of camels carrying precious things from lands far, far away. The boys loved when Jesus watched these roads, for he could tell the loveliest stories about all the people that passed by. On Sabbath days the carpenter's shop was shut, and everything in Nazareth was quiet, for on that day the people went to the little church on the hill to hear about God. Jesus used to go with Joseph, while Mary sat in another part beside all the other women. Jesus liked to go to the little church and to listen to the lovely words that were read and spoken. But best of all, he liked, in his own heart, to say thank you to God, his loving Father, for all the joy of his days, for the sun and the wind and the rain, for the flowers and the trees, for the birds and the beasts, for food to eat and clothes to wear, for work and for play, for fun and for games, and friends to play them with. But most of all, I think for Joseph and Mary, whom he loved with all his heart. So the years passed in Nazareth, Jesus grew to be a man